Oh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our first hybrid program in the courtroom. Let's do a round of applause for that. So just so you know, this is being recorded. It is live on our YouTube and streaming on Zoom as well. So just keep it clean, folks. Gotta cut the edge a little bit. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Candace Summers. I'm the Director of Community Education here at the museum. And I am thrilled to welcome everyone to this afternoon's program, Henny Kilowatt, the Bloomington battery-powered car of tomorrow. So it didn't start, with hybrid cars from Toyota. It didn't start with Rivian. It all started, way back when, with the Henny Kilowatt, with the National Union Electric Company, Bloomington-based Eureka-Williams. And our very own Bill Kemp is going to tell us everything we want to know about the battery-powered car and the roots of that in our community. But if you enjoy today's program, I highly encourage you, if you're not already, to please become a member. This is how we do a lot of the awesome programs that we do here. It's also how we keep the lights on and also have hybrid technology to Zoom this program to those of us who can't join us today. So there are membership brochures outside, or for those of you joining us online, you can go to our website, makehistory.org, for more details. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the program, too, where I will shamelessly plug some other upcoming events. And also, if you don't have a copy of Greg Koos's new book, Freedom, Land, and Community, you're not allowed to leave unless you have one. Just saying. So without further ado, I am going to welcome Bill Kemp.
Thank you, Candace, for that nice introduction. We do have a wonderful staff here. And it's nice to see us gathered together in person once more, right? I think that's really neat. And a hearty welcome to those who have joined us online. Welcome, one and all. As I always stress, and as Candace has alluded to, the McLean County Museum of History is a not-for-profit institution. And the important work we do here is dependent on the support of people like you. My salary is not paid by the city of Bloomington or the county of McLean. It's paid for by the members who support our museum. So the important work we do here in preserving, in collecting, and in making available the papers and the objects of McLean County's past is really dependent on the community as a whole. So we encourage you again to support us in ways you can, and we do offer, with the exception of the Evergreen Cemetery Walk, most of our programming is free, and that's not always the case when it comes to cultural institutions, right? Okay, on to the business at hand. The astonishing success of electric automaker Rivian, if you've been here lately, you know, has made Bloomington-Normal the envy of municipalities across the nation. The company's sprawling plant on Normal's west side also heralds the coming transportation revolution, as electric batteries replace the fossil fuel burning, greenhouse gas spewing internal combustion engine. And though strange it may seem, Rivian is not, as Candace said, the Twin Cities' first foray into electric car manufacturing. So yes, before the space-age Rivian 1T electric truck, there was the Henny Kilowatt battery-powered car engineered and assembled at the Eureka-Williams Corporation plant in Bloomington. It's a story that has been told before, but a lot of local residents just don't know some of the details, right? The Henny Kilowatt was a four-door subcompact, and it featured a repurposed French-made Renault Dauphine car body, which gave the experimental car an even more, as we see here, distinctive look. There were but two model years, 1959 and 1960, and only 200 or fewer were ever made, so not commercially successful, clearly, right? That said, it's a fascinating story of a car of tomorrow that proved to be decades ahead of its time. But before we get to the electrifying story of the Henny Kilowatt, let's turn the clock back even farther. As we know, for much of the 20th century, American automobile manufacturing was dominated by the big three, GM, Ford, and Chrysler. But the early automobile era, right, that was not the case. Back then, seemingly everyone was designing and manufacturing horseless carriages. Across the nation, thousands, literally thousands of blacksmiths, mechanics, engineers, and just tinkerers, right? A lot of people of genius designed, often patented, and occasionally built prototype automobiles. Locally, there was George L. Fish, who established the Fish Automobile Company in 1906 right here in Bloomington. You probably don't hear about it because probably only one prototype automobile was ever manufactured. And then, since this talk is in a way about green energy, there was the remarkable tinkerer, carpenter, experimenter, a man by the name of Ingersoll Moore, a planing mill supervisor at the Chicago and Alton Railroad shops on Bloomington West Side, who created several automobile prototypes. One was steam-powered, as was common back then, and another, dating to 1890, featured an ingenious Rube Goldberg-like clockwork contraption of levers, coiled springs, and gears. The collection of the McLean County Museum of History includes a partial model, that's what you're seeing here, of this engine. As an object in the museum's collections, its purpose had been lost to time for years, with only the inscription. There is an inscription on this, and it's a miniature model, it's a patent model, right? The inscription read, "Invented July 1890 by Ingersoll Moore." That's all really we knew about it, right? That's all that offered help. It was labeled a mystery object for years, and then we later misidentified it. But earlier this year, former museum registrar Chelsea Banks solved this mystery, and before she left for Utah and her new museum job, we do miss you, Chelsea, if you're listening in here from Utah, one of her final tasks was to tell this story, which appeared in a recent Sunday Panagraph Pieces from Our Past column. Staff contributes to a history-minded column in the Sunday Panagraph each week. Chelsea solved this mystery of this engine by tying it to a report on Ingersoll's work in the first issue from 1894 of the Horseless Age, an early automobile trade magazine. The magazine described a three-seat vehicle powered by a spring-driven mechanism identical to the museum's model. So we now know what the heck this thing is, right? And as we like to say at the museum, every object has a story to tell, just like every person. But sometimes it takes a while to get it right. It may come as a surprise to some, but during the automobile industry's formative years, during the first 2 decades of the 20th century, electric cars enjoyed a level of acceptance and popularity not seen since, right about now, right? They were really popular in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, and a lot of people don't know that. Noted the Panagraph in the spring of 1909. Again, 1909, this is the Panagraph. Quote, "The electric vehicle always has been popular in Bloomington. The Baker, the Waverly, and other makes being sold here and driven by owners who want a light car for getting about town." At the time, though, 1909, there were only about 100 automobile owners in all Bloomington. It's not known how many of them drove battery-powered runabouts, but 2 years later, we do know in 1911 that there were an estimated 30 electrics zipping up and down city streets. So in 1911, we had at least 30 electric vehicles moving about town. In the first 2 decades of the 20th century, dealerships and other auto-related businesses began popping up on the periphery of downtown Bloomington. In 1911, Bloomington businessman Charles U. Williams opened a 4-story automobile showroom and garage at 207 East Washington Street. It was called at the time the largest in any city of Bloomington size, and this impressive steel frame and brick edifice was really testament to the coming automobile age. So there's a view. We still know this building today, right? It still stands. And again, a testament to the coming automobile age, right? A magnificent garage and showroom erected on the edge of downtown Bloomington. The C.U. Williams line of 1912 automobiles included a 7-passenger Stearns limousine, a 6-cylinder Chalmers, and a Woods Electric. The Woods Electric was priced at $2,900. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's reasonable, but we need to adjust for inflation. What is that in today's dollars? And that would be the equivalent, if you could imagine it, of about $87,000 for a Woods Electric auto, right, to putter around town. So obviously, before Henry Ford's famous Model T and mass production, gasoline and electric autos were priced well beyond the means of most working and middle-class Americans. And that's an electric auto right there, but I'm not enough of a car guy to know which kind. I'm sure there are folks in the audience that know a lot more than me. Garage man C.U. Williams and his son Walter not only offered sales and maintenance, but auto painting, livery service. What was that? Car rentals by the hour or day when not a lot of many folks had automobiles, so they could rent them there. Storage. Why storage? Well, garages were few. You don't see garages popping up around town until the 1920s and 30s. And remarkably, at the C.U. Williams garage, there was a place to charge your battery-powered car. So we had a charging station by 1911, 1912 in Bloomington. Is that not neat? An advertisement for C.U. Williams reads, quote, entire 4th floor devoted to shop, good mechanics, plenty of light, no loafers. The best work at the least expense. And on the right here, you're seeing the old YMCA, which was torn down in the 1970s to make way for the current YMCA, which soon will be replaced by the new one on the east side. And like too much of downtown, the old YMCA, when it was raised, was converted to a surface parking lot, and that's what it remains today. 5 years later, Williams added more garage space with an adjoining building to the west, and even had architect A.T. Simmons put in a movie theater on the 1st floor. The Castle Theater opened in January of 1916 as Bloomington's first true movie palace, the first building built specifically, or the 1st floor at least, for motion pictures. While C.U. Williams and his son Walter, by this time they were known as C.U. Williams and Son, made use of the 5 floors of the garage space above. Both fireproof buildings of the Williams garage and showroom featured freight elevators large enough to accommodate automobiles. Note the 2nd-story showroom windows designed to display twice as many cars from the street as just street-level windows, right? But C.U. Williams and his son Walter would soon turn away from automobile sales and repair to the potentially more lucrative field of manufacturing. In their case, it would be designing and making oil-burning home heaters. And yes, this does relate to the Henny Kilowatt. Williams Oil-O-Matic, as their company would be called, got its start during the coal shortage of the First World War. Walter, the son, invented an ingeniously engineered oil-powered heater for home or office. They sold well, and soon the new company was building a handsome brick factory at Bell and Hannah Streets on the city's southeast side. And that's where the Henny Kilowatt would be assembled in the late 1950s, early 1960s. So before there was Eureka-Williams, there was C.U. Williams and Son, and then Williams Oil-O-Matic. But before we move on to the Henny Kilowatt, I think it's important to look back quickly at other electric-powered forms of transportation that were once popular here, and some of you may not be aware of this. Yes, Bloomington Normal had electrified streetcars. People are always amazed, right? That was just for the biggest cities in the United States. No, any size community this of Bloomington size would have a network, a streetcar network, right? The establishment of a street railway system in Bloomington Normal dates to just 2 years after the Civil War, 1867. The cars were first pulled by mules or horses, and then the whole system was electrified in 1890. So the electric era for the Bloomington Normal Street Railway system arrives in 1890. And during its height, the railway's network of lines stretched not only from downtown Bloomington to what we now know as Uptown Normal, but through residential sections ranging from wealthy, think of East Washington and East Grove Street, to working class, think of much of the West Side. So you had these lovely scenes, right, in the late 19th and for the first 3 decades of the 20th century, right? Here's a streetcar trundling down North Street in Uptown Normal. The end for the streetcars, electrified streetcars in Bloomington Normal, came in 1936 as the last surviving lines were replaced by the internal combustion engine and city buses, right? Yet not only did most cities the size of Bloomington have an inner city system of electric-powered streetcars, but some, like Bloomington, were part of wider interurban networks, whereas electric streetcars connect neighborhoods within a city or metropolitan area. Interurbans connect cities. And as we can see on the map right here, right, Bloomington was one of 6 central Illinois cities, Peoria, Springfield, Decatur, Champaign, and Danville being the other 5, served by the interurban Illinois traction system, which also linked to the St. Louis metropolitan area. And taking the interurban, the Illinois traction system line from downtown Bloomington to Peoria, through Mackinac, following for some of it the valley of the Mackinac River, was said to be one of the loveliest rail trips in the Midwest, right? And electrified interurban cars, like their streetcar brethren, right, could stop and start much easier than steam locomotives, were not nearly as loud, didn't have any ash or soot. So in some ways they were favored by certain communities or certain folks because of those reasons. The Illinois traction system later became the Illinois Terminal Railroad, and Bloomington was part of this wonderful system from 1906 until 1903. Okay, we're finally back to the Kilowatt. And I'll read some of this brochure. The Kilowatt: silent, simple, versatile, electric, completely uncomplicated, completely undemanding, completely electric. Are you sold on it yet? Both model years, 1959 and 1960, were available in black, red, and gray. The inaugural model was phenomenally underpowered by today's standards, to say the least. 18 2-volt batteries and a 7-horsepower electric motor provided a top speed of 40 miles per hour, 40 miles per hour, and a range of 40 miles. So you couldn't get very far. And if you were climbing up a hill, that range decreased significantly, right, as we're going to see in a moment. Charging required an ordinary electric cord and a household outlet, with a full charge taking upwards of 10 hours. So it took much longer to charge the Henny Kilowatt than it does today's electric cars, even though the power was far less. By the 1930s, Williams Oil-O-Matic Heating Corporation, founded, as we know, hopefully you've been paying attention, father and son Charles and Walter Williams, were selling its oil burner heaters throughout North America and even overseas. And during World War II, the Bloomington manufacturer played its part in the great arsenal of democracy, fulfilling a variety of military contracts requiring precision machine work. And I'm kind of mentioning this because these were highly skilled craftsmen, unionized craftsmen, working on parts and devices, and soon the Henny Kilowatt. Fabricating and manufacturing hydraulic control devices, or what were called oil gears for aiming aircraft guns, as well as other components and devices, demanded highly skilled machine work, as well as smarts and creativity in the pattern shop, the punch press and plating departments, the tool design department, as well as with the engineering staff and in the research and development laboratory. And then, in 1945, Williams Oil-O-Matic merges with the Eureka Vacuum Cleaner Company of Detroit, Michigan, to become finally Eureka-Williams. So we started with C.U. Williams & Son, and then Williams Oil-O-Matic, and now we're finally to Eureka-Williams. So with that merger between Detroit vacuum maker Eureka and Williams Oil-O-Matic, all manufacturing was relocated to Bloomington, and the company was renamed Eureka-Williams. Best known for its Eureka vacuum cleaners and floor polishers, in the early 1960s, we need to remember that Eureka-Williams also still made oil-o-matic burners and also aircraft generators, starters, inverters, and regulators, institutional and school furniture, thermal batteries and fuses, hydraulic pump mechanisms, and precision machine parts of all kinds. In June 1960, New Jersey-based National Union Electric Corporation and Eureka-Williams in Bloomington will agree to merge. The brainchild then behind the Henny Kilowatt electric car would be C. Russell Feldman, who was president of National Union Electric Company. It was said that he got the idea of an electric car from electric golf carts, which were becoming increasingly popular in the post-war years, right, with our flood of consumer products. Exide Battery Corporation was also under the National Union Electric umbrella, and the Henny Kilowatts then would feature Exide batteries. The name Henny Kilowatt, where did that come from? Well, we know that the kilowatt is a unit to measure the output of power in electric motors and engines and heaters and other things, right? But Henny, as we see here, comes from the Henny Motors Company, which was a division of National Union Electric and Eureka-Williams. And I'm reading I'm reading from some Henny Motors promotional material here. Quote, Henny Motors has been a part of the American automobile industry almost since the beginning. Henny has been a maker of buses for schools and public transportation, aluminum airport emergency vehicle bodies, Nike missile trailers, radar van bodies, searchlight and photographic laboratory trailers. What's all this talk of missile trailers and radar and searchlights and laboratory trailers? Well, that tells us we're squarely in the middle of the Cold War, right? And the burgeoning military-industrial complex that President Dwight David Eisenhower had warned us about in his farewell address. Eureka-Williams is credited with designing and building the car's electric propulsion system in consultation with early electric pioneer developer Victor Woke of the California Institute of Technology. All the details have been lost at time. At least for now, we do know that Eureka-Williams of Bloomington always received design credit for the Henny Kilowatt. Why the Renault Dauphine, right? Why use that car body? Well, the French automaker was pulling its, quote, frisky, thrifty family car from the U.S. market at the time, so there were surplus stateside Dauphines to be had. Moreover, this car was rear-engineered, meaning the engine was in the back, which made it better suited for electrical integration, given all the under-the-hood battery space it could provide. It was also small and lightweight, as we can see here, and once you remove the drivetrain and engine, it weighed a mere 1,300 pounds, right? Its specs are as follows: 12.9 feet in length, 5 feet wide, and about 3 feet of headroom once you're inside. Electricity, read a promotional item for the Henny Kilowatt. Electricity overcomes the need for the whole fragile complex of machinery. Valves and springs, rockers and shafts, pistons and rods, cranks and cams, oil and pump, gears and clutch, cylinder head and engine block, all have been replaced by dependable electric power. And there's a nice brochure we have, circa 1960, of the second model, the 1960 more powerful, and I use that term in quotations, model, where you get all the specs there. Okay, all have been replaced, I'm reading from the previous quotation, all have been replaced by dependable electric power, but dependable electric power was not yet dependable enough, of course, despite claims to the otherwise. As the pantograph noted a half a century earlier in 1909, one issue loomed the largest over the future of the electric car. Quote, "The heart of the electric machine is its storage batteries, and the success or failure of that part of the vehicle is the deciding factor in determining whether or not the electric carriage is valuable for general adoption." That was the pantograph in 1909. And then a half a century later, in 1960, battery technology was still a long, long way off from providing the power and the range needed to compete with the internal combustion engine. Given the battery layout here, I say we're looking at the second more powerful model. Eliminating exhaust gases was often mentioned as a positive feature of the Henny Kilowatt. Less smog, right, or no smog. Though we were 3 decades or so away from understanding fully the existential threat posed by greenhouse gases and a warming planet. Eureka-Williams Company's Manual of Electrical Diagrams for the Henny Kilowatt includes these schematics showing the 72-volt and 12-volt charger circuits. The 72 volts were for power, the 12 volts for light, the horn, and the turn signal. In the Henny Kilowatt, there was no heater. Could you believe that? But where climate requires, you could purchase an aircraft-type gasoline heater defroster and have that installed in your electric car. So it is a prototype, right? As with a number of photos in our Henny Kilowatt collection in our archives, and more on that collection in a moment, we do not know the date, location, or the names of these gentlemen. But it's a great photo nonetheless. It's the unveiling of a Henny Kilowatt, though we don't quite know where. Here's a color photograph. I think this was taken in Boca Raton, Florida, and I'll show the reason for that in a minute, in the spring of 1960. But notice the sign, a revolutionary electric car. National Union Electric, the umbrella company for Eureka-Williams, right, viewed electric utilities as a ready market for its Henny Kilowatt, as it was thought battery-powered vehicles were a perfect fit for the stop-and-go work of some of their employees. Think of meter readers, think of bill collectors, think of people needing to move about the large footprint of power plants, and others as well. In addition, electric utilities were eager to promote and even sold sometimes electric appliances, from hair dryers to ranges. Electric cars dovetailed well with this dream of an all-electric future. So the Henny Kilowatt did see its world premiere in Boca Raton, Florida in March of 1960. Its first public demonstration. Why in Boca Raton, Florida? Because that was the annual meeting of the Southeastern Electric Exchange, and Union Electric and Eureka-Williams were looking at electric utilities to buy their prototype car. So they go to a convention or annual meeting down in Florida, and it's quite successful, right? The electric car garnered Associated Press and United Press international coverage, which was then picked up by newspapers across the country. And I think this is just an enlargement of the previous photo. What we're seeing here is the past, right? An older electric car from the early 20th century. The golf cart or the little vehicle is the present, and then the Henny Kilowatt in the middle is the future, right? Quote, the first electric-powered automobile marketed in the United States in 27 years was unveiled and demonstrated here in Boca Raton, reported the UPI on March 23rd. Two of the new cars were sold immediately to the Atlantic City Electric Company, and priority requests, virtually tantamount to orders, were accepted from 32 other utilities. This annual meeting down in Boca Raton and the orders that Eureka-Williams received really would be the high watermark for the Henny Kilowatt as far as commercial success. No one is identified here, but we do have the date and location at least. In the Henny Kilowatt collection, you get a lot of white men in suits standing next to the Henny Kilowatt. Utilities ended up purchasing most of the 46 or 47 Henny Kilowatts that were sold, at least according to the records in our archives. Buyers included the Illinois Power Company of Bloomington, right here, the Central Hudson Gas and Electric Company of Poughkeepsie, New York, the Texas Electric Service Company of Fort Worth, and many, many more. They were shipped from Bloomington or sometimes picked up by utilities from March 31st, 1960 to March 16th, 1961. The price of the vehicle for utilities without the charger or any extras was $3,650. And again, adjusting for inflation, that would be the equivalent of about $35,000 today. And here's an invoice for one of the Henny Kilowatts sold to the Atlantic City Electric Company. Yeah, so they're buying additional chargers as well, so that's why the ticket price or the sticker price is more than $3,650. Here's a nice view of the front of the Henny Kilowatt. Is this C. Russell Feldman, who was president of National Union Electric, or is this Bayard L. England, who was chairman of the Atlantic City Electric Company, who was an enthusiastic backer of the Henny Kilowatt project? Or is this somebody else? Unfortunately, I just don't know. Atlantic City Electric figures that on average, each electric car with batteries being charged at night will use $50 worth of juice a year. And most of the current, this is the creamy part we're told, will be drawn at off-peak hours after midnight, which means far more efficient use of generating equipment. So you could see the lure of the electric car to electric utilities with everybody plugging in their garage. Given the number of batteries we're seeing here, I'd say this is the 1959 model with its 18 2-volt batteries and a top speed of 40 miles per hour and a range of 40 miles. And just a few more images. In addition to electric utilities, the Henny Kilowatt, it was thought, could be marketed to the general public as what? A family's second automobile, good for shopping trips and in-town use. In the early 20th century, electric cars were often marketed to women, and we see that's the case still in 1960, right? Why were electric cars marketed toward women in the early 20th century? Well, they didn't have the hand crank, right, for the engine. They weren't nearly as dirty. Early automobiles required a lot of maintenance by the owner himself, so you didn't have to get your hands dirty, right? And on and on. Simplified dash, reads a promotional brochure for the Henny Kilowatt. Quote, speedometer and mileage counter, 2 power indicators, and forward reverse switch complete the uncomplicated new Kilowatt dash. A charging cord with a 25-foot reach came with your Kilowatt. Unfortunately, no one is identified here. Again, all we know is the date and location. This is in front of the home office of Eureka-Williams, right? At any rate, Eureka-Williams could not produce the cars cheap enough or fast enough to sell at the target price of $3,500. So it didn't take long to realize that this was just not an economically viable project, though a well-intentioned one, certainly. The Henny Kilowatt makes an appearance, as I mentioned, in newspapers across the country, including the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Quote, the electric automobile, simple, silent, and economical in operation, is making a modest comeback after many years of near oblivion. I'm not sure a modest comeback is going to cut it, right, in the white-hot economy of the early 1960s. The Kilowatt is as suitably suburban as the patio, declared one promotional item. Quote, it provides the homemaker with a nimble car for shopping and errands, gives the commuter new comfortable transportation to his train or office, so husband and wife, right? And reduces the cost of operating a second car so essential to modern suburban living. So this is a post-war car as at least white America, right, is moving out from large metropolitan cities out into the greener pastures of suburbs. Isn't this something, right? This is just an incredible item in our collection. This is a mock-up of an owner's manual that I think was never completed, right? So Swedish, how do we have all this cool stuff? Okay, well, I'll tell the story here. The Swedish home appliance manufacturer AB Electrolux purchased National Union Electric and Eureka-Williams in 1975, though the now named simply Eureka Company remained a leading employer in the Twin Cities for 2 more decades. Then in 2011, more than a decade ago, when Electrolux was closing its last offices in the Twin Cities, company officials invited McLean County Museum of History staff to review for potential donation boxes of promotional materials, scrapbooks, employee newsletters, newspaper clippings, correspondence, and photographs. So for several days, archivist George Perkins and I sorted through all this material before boxing much of it up and shipping it back to the museum for the archives. And included in this historically invaluable collection of Williams Oil-O-Matic, Eureka-Williams, and Eureka Company materials were papers, about 1 linear feet of paper, related to the development and marketing of the Henny Kilowatt, an absolute gold mine. And we're seeing the fruits of that labor right here today, right? Again, this is the artwork from the mock-up of the owner's manual. You can see the emphasis on suburban living, right? Car of tomorrow, today. Yeah, I really like that slogan, right? So how do we organize such donations, right? It's usually in a jumble where we get it and we have to bring it back here, and then we have to organize it, we have to process it, we have to inventory it, we have to place it in acid-free boxes and acid-free enclosures like folders, we have to create a typed Word document known as a finding aid, and all that takes a tremendous amount of work, right? So longtime museum volunteer John Alterick, John's in the audience, so yeah, there's John right there, right? He is currently tackling this project, and we're seeing here don't do any proofing here. This is a draft, right, of John's finding aid as he's inventorying item by item this collection. And this collection includes a lot of pretty arcane correspondence. So John's been at it for a while, right? As a not-for-profit institution, we really lean on volunteers to do a lot of important work, right? And John has got the smarts to do this. He's a retired State Farm attorney, though he's best known for being the husband of Karen Schmidt, right? As we know. And John has tackled other really important collections for us, such as the Irvin Tick Bloomington Human Relations Commission collection, which is really important, the Merlin Kennedy collection, Gummerman Printing collection, and others as well. Okay, kilowatt bulletins, the first three date to June of 1961, addressed to, quote, all owners and users of the Henny Kilowatt. The kilowatt bulletins, this was the introductory letter, which included the first three bulletins, were designed to provide suggestions as to improving the performance of the battery-powered car. They were getting a lot of complaints, right? So in the first bulletin, kilowatt owners and users were encouraged to rewire the charger from the lower rate of 1 amperes to the higher rate of 3 amperes. Accordingly, the first bulletin included this diagram illustrated the wiring for both finishing rates. So I guess we'd call this a corporate-approved hack, right, today, right? Because that's exactly what it is. And I wish I had time to show others, too, because they're really fascinating. In 1969, Exide battery personnel, remember these were installed with Exide batteries, which was part of the National Union Electric umbrella of companies. In 1961, Exide battery personnel reached out to utility companies that owned Henny Kilowatts to gauge the performance of the car in general and their batteries in particular. Responses were then compiled into these summaries, which are now in the Henny Kilowatt collection. Here we see a most unhappy Pennsylvania Electric Company, which is, quote, emphatic in stating its dissatisfaction with the performance from the beginning of the Kilowatt because of the very hilly terrain in and around Johnstown. Car has been used very little and has been the subject of ridicule by both the public and the company's own employees because of the numerous times the car has had to be towed back to the garage when the power failed. And all I can say to that is, ouch, right? But here's also good old Atlantic City Electric Company, right, which was a supporter of the Henny Kilowatt project with, quote, no complaints, though they were using both of their kilowatts not for on-the-job tasks, but rather simply to promote the idea of the electric car. The inter-office memo here noted that the work on the Henny Kilowatt received trademark status in 1961, and there was interest in renewing the mark, though we don't quite know what happened. And these two photographs, the first one and this one, were attached to the memo about renewing the trademark in 1960. What is this, I wondered, right? For being Eureka's national sales leader, Doyle Bryson of Akron, Ohio, is given a 1970 Pontiac Grand Prix. Why isn't he given a Henny Kilowatt? Eureka-Williams still had plenty of them around, as you're going to see in a moment, right? But let it be noted, of course, right, that the Grand Prix boasted about 5 times the get up and go is the poor, underpowered, but nonetheless lovable Henny Kilowatt. So yes, for a decade and a half after the last Henny Kilowatt rolled off the Bloomington assembly line, unsold inventory, 70 or so cars gathered dust in a warehouse on 403 South Center Street. Here's some enlargements from the previous photograph. That lot was then hauled away in the summer of 1975 to the Tiffany Motor Corporation in Opelika, Florida. The pantograph noted at the time that the electric car, quote, failed to find a market in the petroleum-drenched 1960s. Remember, that's the pantograph observing the story of the Henny Kilowatt in 1975 when the energy crisis, right, loomed large over our troubled nation. Okay, we're moving on a little bit. Diamond Star Motors, later Mitsubishi Motors Manufacturing, represents certainly a seminal chapter in local automotive history. No surprise there. And let's not forget that without an empty Mitsubishi plant, Rivian would not have established its first manufacturing plant, would have established its first manufacturing plant somewhere else. Some other community would be the envy of the nation, right? And I probably wouldn't be giving this talk today, though we would still have the Henny Kilowatt collection. So here's the late Illinois governor, Big Jim Thompson, in Normal, listening to Chrysler chairman Lee Iacocca, who was speaking from Chrysler headquarters in Michigan. I guess Iacocca couldn't be bothered to come down to Normal. This was the official announcement of Normal as the site of the future, what was first known as Diamond Star, as a partnership between Mitsubishi and Chrysler, right? And here's one of the many, many hundreds and hundreds of items in the museum's Diamond Star Motors Mitsubishi archive collection. And more on how we acquired that in a second. There's the a grand opening program from 1988. Here's an aerial view from our collection, a photograph, right, of the then 636-acre site and 2 million square feet manufacturing facility on the west side of Normal. Mitsubishi will later expand, and of course Rivian has done significant expansions since then, right? Production of the Mitsubishi Eclipse and the Plymouth Laser began on September 1, 1988. In May 2016, it's hard to believe, but that's 6 years ago, in May 2016, Mitsubishi Motors invited museum staff to visit the soon-to-be-shuttered plant and determine what items, papers, and objects the museum would want as a donation. So several staff members were given a tour also of the plant by Dan Irvin, who had a 17-year career with Mitsubishi Motors as head of public relations. So the photographs we're seeing here were taken during our tour of the plant given by Dan Irvin. And then this was kind of a precursor to sorting through all material for potential donation. I know the plant has been expanded significantly with Rivian Automotive, but I was still just absolutely dumbstruck by the scale of the plant, right, as we can see here. In fact, it was so large, as many of you know, right? Employees traveled the assembly lines via bicycle, right? I want one of those. So here are two more gems from our Diamond Star Motors Mitsubishi Motors collection. Again, archivist George Perkins and I then spent several days in the spring of 2016 going through the company and employee collections of newsletters, catalogs, correspondence, photographs, blueprints. It was a lot of stuff. Who knows what all was there. And then we brought back several linear feet of collection material. The plant had some booming years for sure, and we can only hope Rivian someday reaches these numbers, right? In 1996, for example, 3,900 employees at the plant produced 53,803 Mitsubishi Eclipses, 9,309 Eclipse Spider convertibles, 62,263 Gallants, 13,826 Eagle Talons, 31,781 Chrysler Sebrings, and last, 35,774 Dodge Avengers. That's all in 1996. That's something like 207,000 cars, right? Guest curated by Mike Matika. Mike's here in the audience. Yeah, there's Mike. A our Working for a Living exhibit, one of 5 permanent exhibits on our main floor that tell the story of McLean County, right? But Mike chose to tell the story of working for a living through the perspective mostly of workers, right, as opposed to owners. The display on the far left is devoted to Diamond Star Mitsubishi and some of the objects in the collection Susan Hartsold obtained in the spring of 2016 when we were in the plant, right? The one in the middle is devoted to tire maker Bridgestone and the plant in North Normal. The Mitsubishi uniform was donated by Glenn Wallace, who worked at the plant for 27 years, first in the body shop and then in the paint works, from 1989 to its closure in 2016. Glenn was there for most of it, right? He was a member of the United Auto Workers, Local 2488, the first union to have an agreement with a foreign automaker in the United States. Mike, is that the only agreement to this date? Okay, so there's one other plant that has a UAW agreement, but this was the first and only one of 2. I think it's something to be proud of. Glenn not only donated this uniform shirt, but a collection of Diamond Star Mitsubishi employee materials that he had gathered over the years, including benefit plans, UAW agreements, workplace conduct policies, employee handbooks and training manuals, and more. So in addition to the Diamond Star Mitsubishi collection, we have an archivally rich collection pertaining to the career of one particular line worker. So that's pretty important for us. The 5-door electric hatchback IMEV, which is an acronym for Mitsubishi Innovative Electric Vehicle, that's a mouthful, right, was never manufactured locally, but plenty of them were used, and some are still being used locally today. And I believe the EV Town Initiative, the Electric Vehicle Town Initiative, is still ongoing with the goal to create broad-based community support for Bloomington-Normal being a model electric car community, right? And many of us will remember this wonderful commercial. You can still watch it on YouTube, right? In 2011, a Mitsubishi commercial celebrating electric cars shined a spotlight on Normal being an EV town, right? The commercial also featured 92-year-old Ruth Steele, who was still an avid walker and bridge player, who then in the commercial tools around in an IMEV. So yeah, Ruth passed away in 2018 at the age of 99, and she's certainly missed today. Here's R.J. Scaringe, we know the name, right? Rivian Automotive CEO, welcoming Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker to the public rollout of Rivian prototype vehicles, including the R1T pickup and the R1S SUV. And there's a whole gaggle of politicians and others in the lower right corner, right? I guess if you're at an appearance for automobiles, you don't wear the tie, right? You keep the coat, but you drop the tie. You want to look a little more relaxed. I'm just doing. At the time, what is this? The fall of 2019, Rivian had 200 employees in Bloomington-Normal. By October of last year, there were more than 3,000 Rivian employees working in the Twin Cities. These 2 photographs come courtesy of the Pantograph and their wonderful photographer who's still on staff, Dave Praber. The large battery pack that now comes standard with the Rivian R1T gets an EPA estimated range of 314 miles. So that's a long way, figuratively and geographically or physically, from the days of the Henny Kilowatt. And it's got a lot of power, right? Car and Driver reported last month that the electric pickup's 3.3 second blast from 0 to 60 miles per hour beat all other pickups on the market. Not just electrics, but even gas-powered pickups, which is pretty remarkable, right? Rivian's now, Rivian trucks, SUVs are featured in community events. Here we see Museum Executive Director Emeritus. Greg's got a fancy title, even though he retired. So he's Executive Director Emeritus. He was the Grand Marshal of last year's Twin Cities Christmas Parade, and for that he was able, or he got the pleasure to ride in the bed of an R1T Rivian pickup truck. And if you're from town, you know that it used to be common for people to get all excited when they'd spot a Rivian, right? You'd text your friends or post the photograph on Facebook or whatever the case may be. Now we're starting to see them everywhere, which is kind of nice, right? Like, here, I saw one the other day. Right, so it's not exciting as it once was to run into a Rivian. So I took this photograph 10 days ago while running errands for the museum. I think it's kind of nice to see them dirty, right? I mean, they're work vehicles. They should be dirty, right? And as we wrap up here, you folks have been really patient, and I'm coming in on a reasonable time, I guess. I put Carriage House Motor Company in Mattituck, New York, because there was a business card attached to the photos we're going to see. So I assume this Henny was owned by the Carriage House Motor Company in New York. In the end, in the 1960s, as I've noticed elsewhere, the 1960s really were destined to be the decade not of the Henny Kilowatt as we know, and its battery-powered successors, but rather automobiles like the Ford Mustang and the Lincoln Continental and the Buick Riviera and their many hulking, gas-guzzling kin, right? Again, it would be a petroleum-drenched 1960s, 1970s, 80s, and on, until hopefully we're changing that finally. This was a Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA spokesperson, in October 1961. So the TVA, the famous Tennessee Valley Authority of the New Deal fame, right? They have a Henny Kilowatt. So a spokesperson is talking about their kilowatt in the fall of 1961. Quote, "Our Henny isn't ready for general use because it is too low powered and it can't go fast enough, and the fuel charge doesn't last long enough. But we're working on it, and maybe soon it'll be the ideal family second car for short runs to the store and taking kids to school. We believe battery-powered cars will become popular if and when a battery developed with a capacity greater than that of batteries now available. That will probably take intensive research." This was in 1961, and indeed, that's how it played out these many decades later, and it's still playing out, right? So much depends on battery storage capacity and power. How could you not be romantic about baseball, right? That's the remark Oakland Athletics general manager Billy Beane, who is played by Brad Pitt in a poignant scene near the end of the 2011 whip-smart baseball movie Moneyball. I'm sure many of you have seen it. How can you not be romantic about baseball? And I end with these two photographs, and I guess I'll pose this question: how can you not be romantic about the Henny Kilowatt? Thank you so much.
We have time for a few questions, and if there's questions from online, we'll repeat them and also repeat yours so people can hear them, what was asked. So fire away if you have questions. Someone asked if anyone owns an electric car currently. One, two people. Either of them Rivians or a Henny Kilowatt?
Which leads to a follow-up question. I often get asked, how many Henny Kilowatts are out there? We don't really know. You see conflicting information on the internet. John Alterich, the volunteer, is processing the collection, has kind of poked around some. But there's a few out there, certainly.
That was also my burning question, if there were still any Henny Kilowatts around. Question? Yes? Someone saw a Henny Kilowatt in the wild in Pennsylvania. Clearly not a place that had hills, right? Decades of dust, not in movement anymore. That's unfortunate. Yes, John? So Margaret Black, the mother-in-law of Jack Lewis, had a Henny Kilowatt. Excellent. On Jefferson Street. And her husband was the general comptroller for Bike Candy. Awesome. Small driver for a small car. Excellent, excellent. Any other questions? Tori, are there any online? All right, so my shameless plugs as we wrap up. Bill, you want to grab those two things for me? Thank you. I have props. I can't do my shameless plugs without props, right? Shameless plug one, buy Greg's book downstairs before you leave if you haven't already. Really and truly, very excellent history. Takes a deep dive into some overlooked and marginalized groups in our community history. So pick one up today, or check it out from your local library. A lot of the local libraries in town have copies of these available for checking out. Second, please join us for our Trades and Labor Fest coming up on April 30th. If some of you remember, we had one in 2019, a very gloomy, rainy day. So we're hoping for much better weather. Keep your fingers and toes crossed for a lovely day. And join us next Saturday here at the museum for an in-person program with Marcia Young, the former site manager of the David Davis Mansion, who will be sharing her new book honoring the 150th anniversary of the mansion. There will be copies available for purchase. It'll be here in the courtroom, I think at 1 o'clock. So I hope you will come back and join us. And thank you all once again today for coming out and hearing all about the Henny Kilowatt. And